What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and with the iPhone SE just announced, it adds yet another option to the long list of relevant iPhones to consider purchasing in 2020. And I know one of the most popular questions from people with an iPhone 8 or an iPhone 7 or earlier is, should I buy the new 2020 iPhone SE or the 2018 iPhone XR? And that's exactly the question we're going to be tackling in this video. And of course, I will be using the iPhone 8 here to replicate the iPhone SE until I get it in hand next week. I'll also be doing an in-depth comparison between the SE and the XR next weekend, so stay tuned to the channel for that. This video is more of a buying guide and a quick comparison so you don't make the mistake of ordering an iPhone SE when it goes on sale or the mistake of purchasing an iPhone XR instead. So I just want to make sure you guys make a wise purchasing decision. That's my whole goal with this video, and there's a lot to talk about, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. All right, so let's start with the obvious. So the iPhone SE here has, of course, a home button and bezels, whereas the iPhone XR, it does have some slight bezels around, but obviously it does not have a home button. It's all gesture based, you use gestures, and of course you have Face ID up here compared to Touch ID as the biometric to unlock the iPhone and approve purchases via Apple Pay and things like that. Now, I personally prefer Face ID over Touch ID, but this is all going to come down to personal preference and what you prefer. Now, if you're coming from an iPhone 8 or older and you're used to that home button and you don't want to move on from it, you should probably consider going with the SE. But if you want to buy into a more future-proof design and biometric system with Face ID, you should probably strongly consider the iPhone XR. And while that home button is a very important factor, I think a lot of people underestimate how important of a factor the home button and Touch ID is even here in 2020. There still are other factors to consider when comparing these two devices. For instance, the actual display itself. So the iPhone XR has a 6.1-inch liquid retina display with a resolution of 1792 by 828, whereas the iPhone SE has a 4.7-inch retina display with a resolution of 1334 by 750, and both of these have a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. So the iPhone XR is clearly going to have a bigger display and a higher resolution, so videos and movies and playing games are just going to be much more enjoyable to play and watch on the XR versus the SE. That's a given. But the SE display isn't going to be bad. I mean, it's going to be just like the display on the iPhone 8. So it's not going to be bad, but of course, side by side, you will be able to see that the XR is going to have a slightly better display. And once again, you just have a lot more real estate to play with, and you don't have the bezels and the home button there to interfere when you're trying to play a game or watch something on Netflix or something like that. So media consumption and gaming is clearly going to be better on the XR. The XR is also chunkier than the SE in terms of both thickness and weight. So the iPhone XR is 75 millimeters thick and it weighs 194 grams, whereas the SE is 67 millimeters thick and weighs 148 grams. So pretty decent difference there. You can even see just from looking at them that the XR is a lot thicker than the SE. You can also tell a difference in the weight. It's not as noticeable in the weight as you would think. 194 versus 148 seems like a huge difference, but it's really not. I mean, you can clearly tell that the XR is heavier, but it's not a major difference. Now, another major area you need to consider is the camera. So both cameras have the same exact single 12 megapixel wide angle camera lens, but there's gonna be a difference in both picture and video quality thanks to the new A13 Bionic chip inside of the iPhone SE. So the iPhone XS and the iPhone XR were the first iPhones to introduce Smart HDR with that A12 Bionic chip. And this led to super amazing colors and just better picture quality in general on those phones compared to previous iPhones, and also made a difference, made stills, in my opinion, better than some of the Samsung phones for the first time. So with the A13 chip, Apple improved Smart HDR even further with next generation Smart HDR. So just this addition alone is going to mean that you're going to get better colors, better picture quality, and it's just going to already be better just from that alone than the iPhone XR. So picture quality will definitely be better on the SE. As far as video quality goes, both can shoot 4K 60 video, and the colors on the SE should be just as good as the XR, but those could also be better thanks to that A13 Bionic chip. But I think the biggest difference you're going to see is going to be in still photography compared to the A12 chip and the XR. And you guys already know I'm going to be doing a camera comparison as well. I'm going to be doing a comparison with everything with the iPhone SE come next week and into the following week. But I do predict that the SE will have better picture and video quality than that of the 10R, despite having the same camera lens. I should also mention that you can take both portrait photos and portrait selfies on both devices as well. However, you will not get Animoji and Memoji features on the iPhone SE, whereas you do get that on the iPhone 10R. So that could be a big deal for those of you who use Animojis and Memojis. They're pretty fun to play around with. You will not get that on the iPhone SE, unfortunately. Area to research before buying any phone, not just an iPhone, but especially when we're comparing two very similar phones. So we have the iPhone 10R here, which has the A12 Bionic chip and 3 gigabytes of RAM. And then we have the iPhone SE with the A13 Bionic and also 3 gigabytes of RAM. So Apple claims the A13 chip will be 20% faster than the A12 while using 40% less power. So in theory, the iPhone SE should be at least 20% faster than the 10R while also not draining battery as quickly as if it were on the 10R. Now these stats and these claims are easy to look at and make a quick assumption, but I'll tell you right now that the difference in performance just day to day, tweeting and doing your typical things that you do on your phone every single day, the difference in speed is going to be very, very minor. You're probably only going to notice a big difference in gaming and more intensive tasks. But of course, like always, I will be running a speed test here on the channel very soon so you can find out just how much faster the iPhone SE is over the 10R. But the fact that the SE also has 3 gigabytes of RAM is really the thing to note here and really the thing I'm kind of surprised about. So we should see similar RAM management as well with plenty of RAM there. And speaking of that battery, how will these two compare when it comes to battery life? So the iPhone 10R has a 2942 milliamp hour battery, whereas the iPhone SE has the same battery as the iPhone 8, which is 1821 milliamp hours. So the iPhone 10R should definitely get better battery life on paper, but let's once again remember two things. So number one, the A13 chip uses 40% less power than the A12. And number two, the iPhone SE display is clearly much smaller and has a lower resolution, so the battery should last a bit longer than if the 10R were to have the same sized battery. But of course, the battery size on the 10R is just bigger, so it should get better battery life. And lastly, of course, is the pricing and which one you should buy. So the iPhone 10R starts at $599 for a 64 gigabyte model, whereas the SE starts at $399 for a 64 gigabyte model. So that's a $200 difference in price if you were to buy new from Apple. And as far as which one you should buy, like always, that depends. So I'm going to assume that most people considering one of these two phones will be upgrading from an iPhone 8, an iPhone 7, an iPhone 6S, an iPhone SE, or maybe even something older than that. So with that in mind, I would save the $200 and go with the SE. So you're going to get a much better camera, maybe not much better, but you are going to get a better camera. You're going to have faster performance, and you're going to have an additional year of software support over the iPhone 10R. And plus, you get to keep that home button that you're comfortable with and that you probably love using over something like Face ID. However, on the flip side, if you value that near edge-to-edge display and Face ID and you want better battery life, the iPhone 10R might be worth an extra $200, but still, that's a pretty big price difference for a 2 years older iPhone. But once again, it does have a much more modern design. It looks a lot more modern. And of course, you will get better battery life. So it just depends on what you value in a phone. So you can get a used, great condition iPhone 10R on eBay or Facebook Marketplace right now for around that $400 price tag. So then all of a sudden it comes down to if you're okay with getting a pre-owned iPhone and giving up a slightly better camera and getting slightly worse performance than you would get on the iPhone SE. So me personally, if I just had a $400 budget and only $400, the decision would be pretty easy. I would go with a used iPhone 10R, mainly for that modern look, the near edge-to-edge display here. I really like that. I also prefer Face ID over Touch ID and the home button. I like not having a home button, and I also like having better battery life, which I would get on the iPhone 10R. So that's why I would choose that. But once again, everybody values different aspects of an iPhone differently, and you may not care as much about that edge-to-edge design. You may not want a big beefy phone that's clearly a lot thicker and heavier and much bigger display. You may like that smaller form factor and having that home button. And if that's you, if you just want a brand new functional and fast iPhone for probably the best deal you'll ever see on a new iPhone, go with the iPhone SE and call it a day. You definitely cannot go wrong with buying the iPhone SE at all. And plus, I should also mention that if you are still thinking about going the used route with the iPhone 10R, there are always risks associated with that, whereas you could get scammed. You could get an iPhone XR that maybe has scratches on it that you didn't see, in the listing or something like that. So there's always a little bit of risk involved with buying used. So that's another reason people usually opt to go for new iPhones over used. But just depends. You do have to do research when buying used. I actually made a whole video on that, so I will have that linked down in the description if you are thinking about buying a used XR, because those are also a great value right now. So those are my thoughts on the iPhone XR versus the brand new 2020 iPhone SE. Let me know which one you're going to be picking up, or if you already have an iPhone XR, let me know if you thought about upgrading to the iPhone SE at all. And of course, also stay tuned for an in-depth comparison between these two phones when I actually get the real iPhone SE in hand next Friday. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. And of course, subscribe for a ton of iPhone SE 2020 coverage coming starting next Friday. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.